Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lemongrass Roots, where we talk about all things SAP. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Jordan Kuhns from GROWMARK. GROWMARK is one of our oldest and certainly one of our favorite customers. We've worked with them for a long time as they have adopted cloud. And what we'll do today is we'll jump into Jordan's story, GROWMARK's story, and learn a bit more. So first off, Jordan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Eamon. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. So, Jordan, I think where I'd love to start with, and certainly whenever we started working with GROWMARK, it was a learning to me, is exactly who are GROWMARK. And, I know there's many people know who they are, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't. So do you mind giving us a little bit of background in the company and what you guys do?
Absolutely. Yeah, GROWMARK is actually an agriculture cooperative. We're based in Bloomington, Illinois, and we do business both in the United States and Canada today. We were actually founded back in 1927, so we're approaching that 100-year mark, and have kind of morphed and evolved throughout that time. But the original purpose for our cooperative was farmers needed a reliable supply of fuel as they replaced horses with mechanized equipment on the farm back in the late 20s there. So kind of a fun history about who we are and where we came from. Today, we're about a $15 billion company. I've heard somebody say, to your point, Eamon, a very quiet $15 billion company. We kind of sit in the background really with the purpose in the cooperative spirit to serve our member companies first and foremost. But GROWMARK today provides just about anything you'd need to run a successful, profitable farming operation. So we have seed, crop protection, and fertilizer products from the inputs side of the business. We provide grain marketing services at the end of the season when things get harvested in the field. And then throughout that season, we're providing fuel, gas, diesel, propane products, and a wide variety of lubricants and greases and oils that you might need for equipment and whatnot on the farm too. It's a pretty broad set of products. We offer a bunch of services to our members as well in the HR and IT space. So like I said, if you need it to run a farm or be a successful ag retailer or one of our members, we're hoping to provide the product or the service to you to help out with that.
That's fantastic. And one of the things I noticed again when I was on site first in the early days was, what I loved about it was the culture of the company is still very rooted in that, as you say, the cooperative and the farmers fundamentally. But on the flip side, you guys are using some of the highest tech that's out there. You've been an e-commerce company for probably longer than most. So as you say, even though it's a quiet Midwestern culture, it's actually very avant-garde when it comes to technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was doing a little bit of research before I got on so I could get the numbers right. I think we moved a lot of our applications into the cloud a little over 15 years ago. Before then, we did have an on-premise data center that was used for quite some time after with some of the lingering things. But the bulk of our IT infrastructure has been in the cloud since 2010. We started with kind of a colo setup here in town with another partner that helped us with that. But we've actually been an AWS customer for over 10 years at this point, starting with a move of our retail member company ERP systems that we host in the cloud for them. That kind of went first. Some of the custom web applications and things that we build and support, those were kind of right there alongside. And then, of course, we moved our SAP system into the cloud during our initial implementation, starting in about 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm. No, I remember that well. And again, one of the things I learned, as we got to know the team was the importance of uptime and the direct consequence of downtime for GROWMARK. That maybe in some ways was even more profound or more direct than we've seen with other companies. Again, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the availability and how important that is for your back end systems to make sure that they're available to your customers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I wasn't involved in the decision making back then, but I remember there being some real concerns with the move to the cloud and what would that look like, right? It was a change in direction and approach, and we needed a lot of reassurance that availability and stability would be there, because it's really almost twofold. A lot of our product lines are commodities, fertilizer products, gas, diesel, propane. Our customers, in many instances, especially in the fuel side, are pulling into a facility where there are multiple vendors that have pumps at the rack there to buy that product. And if our system is down and we're not able to get a truck there or get a product loaded, it's not a difficult switch, right? The barriers to switch in those instances in the commodity space is not too difficult. So if we're down, that's direct business lost.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side, kind of with the farmer being at the heart of the entire GROWMARK and FS cooperative system, if I have a select window without rain, with the right temperature to apply fertilizer in my field or plant the seed for my crop this upcoming year, you better not, contribute to me missing that window, because those windows, depending on the year, can be really, really short. So there's also huge reputational risk with not being able to get product out to the end farmer or the grower, that has direct impact on their profitability at the end of the day as well, if we're unable to get the right thing to the right place at the right time. So there's high stakes, and we work really hard to make sure that nothing happens that disrupts our business in that space.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a really great example of the importance of IT in some of the business processes. But of course, as you mentioned, the SAP move to AWS cloud native happened about 7-8 years ago. But of course, now you're continuing to evolve, continuing to look at the next thing, and obviously, like every SAP customer, you've been getting your head around the RISE proposition, the new end state. And I know that we've helped you a little bit with some of the discussions on this, but I know plenty of people listening will be really keen to understand, your thought process in that, and your decision making. What swayed you? What alternatives did you look at, and ultimately, what is your plan going forward with that?
Yeah. So when I started in this position just over 18 months ago, it was thankfully very transparent that GROWMARK was exploring an S4 HANA migration. So we implemented SAP in a phased approach starting in that 2016, 2017 timeframe, but it took us 4 or 5 years to really finish. And it sounds weird to say finish, right? Because it's not something you ever feel like you're done. But we had all of our main business lines up and live on SAP about 4 to 5 years after we kicked that project off. And we implemented ECC at that point in time because we just knew, guidance from SAP and other people in the industry, what you need out of SAP is not yet available in S4. So we're like, let's park it. We know that we can migrate in the future. And now that we're finally seeing the maturity of that S4 HANA system, we were revisiting that decision again to say, all right, what's next? Especially with the maintenance, end of maintenance kind of published roadmap from SAP that made sure we kind of stayed on track with where we were going. So we started to look at S4 HANA in a migration project. I think about 2 years ago, I came in at the very early stages of that. We knew that with end of maintenance, we had the option to stay on ECC and privatize the maintenance, but it was so fresh in our mind that our former legacy ERP system, which we called Omni, we built it ourselves. We experienced the growing pains of GROWMARK expanding its business and really being stretched to make that old legacy system work. It worked really well for about 25 years, in multiple iterations. But the prospect of seeing our SAP ECC system kind of fall not do a parallel path, but a path that feels a little similar of, okay, we're privatizing the support of this. We're not going to get any major updates. It's just really steady state security patching, things like that. That wasn't really palatable. And we knew that with our changing business, with the changing technology landscape and all the new innovations coming out, we knew for GROWMARK it was best to be in that S/4HANA world, in the as new of a version of the product as we should be on, so that we can take advantage of all the new functionality and what's potentially to come.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I mean, I think as you say, the one thing that always concerns me about parking maintenance is security. It's just, it's just that it's the known unknown, as it were. We all know that that people are always trying to come up with new ways of attacking systems. Of course, SAP is a ripe target if you can go after it. But just being able to know that you've got the latest patches, the latest security at your fingertips is, I'm sure, for you and your customers, really important to see. So then as you move towards RISE, I mean, obviously S4 being the heart of it. Obviously, you can look at brownfield, greenfield. Did you think about greenfield? Did you evaluate that, or did you have any? What sort of factors did you consider when you were looking at that decision?
Yeah, we first I had to get my arms wrapped around those terms and learn what they all kind of meant. Those were new concepts to me as I stepped into the evaluating S4 world. Mm-hmm. But really, from a greenfield perspective, there wasn't much interest internally. We were, in certain business units, were 5 years after their initial implementation. We've worked really hard to stabilize their processes in SAP, and we finally got to the point where, they're feeling good about how everything works. And again, back to the seasonal agriculture perspective, that really just means that those business units had really only done certain things in SAP 4 or 5 times, because maybe they only do something in the fall or in the summer. So the idea of another cycle through that, of a greenfield implementation where we try to rethink processes and start from that clean slate, wasn't really palatable. We knew that all the work that we'd done to get ECC to work the way that we need for our business is still really valuable, and it's differentiated for us. So the brownfield approach was also was where it really started to shine as the ideal option for us. And I think another small factor, depending on how you look at it, that we considered was, once again, we really only had about 7 years of data. So it wasn't like we were dealing with a pile of 20 years of SAP data and what do we do, and the business is markedly different. The way we operate is fairly similar. We like the way the system is working. We just want to be in the new version, so we're set up for success. So that's kind of why we chose the brownfield path.
Yeah, makes sense. Exactly as you say. I mean, I think greenfield always ends up being disruptive and more expensive, but ultimately, best suited for people who've maybe got a legacy of acquisitions and divestments and lots of ancient, as you say, history. But you guys are still fairly fresh implemented, so I think it's a good, for you, certainly brownfield seems to fit. And of course, as part of the whole journey, there's other modernization in the SAP landscape that you're doing as well, not least around BTP. And I know that, again, you've got stuck into that ahead of the RISE move. So again, maybe give the listeners a bit of a view into your thinking around why you are using BTP, what are you using it for, how do you see it being adopted going forward?
Yeah. BTP definitely falls into, with the work we're doing with Lemongrass right now, a bucket of what we're calling no regret work ahead items. Those are some activities that you would expect to see, right? We're cleaning up data, we're archiving big tables, we're finding duplicate customers and vendors for the business partner move. But it's also some no regret go forward items like the BTP implementation, So we're using lemongrass to move just 10 interfaces or integrations up to the integration suite within the BTP. And we're doing that for a variety of reasons. It's going to allow us to dip our toe into the water and understand what that infrastructure looks like, maybe learn some early lessons now when it's a very small scope on provisioning, access, permissions. I know we tripped over the line with provisioning the wrong SKU, and we had to work with SAP to get that figured out, for instance. So, all right, great to do that now and rather than in the flurry of a project. But it also builds the competency of our B2B team that deals and manages all these integrations, so they understand what integration suite can do, and that part of our project hopefully goes much more smoothly as a result. They're working in a familiar application and environment. They know how the connectivity works. They know how to set new things up. I think it'll really pay off down the line, and really the trade-off we signed up for by doing that is the 10 integrations we're converting now, we're connecting back to the ECC environment. And then we just have to swing the backside of integration suite to point towards S4 once we're ready to do so. So hopefully not too much work and oversimplification of what that takes, but we thought that was a really good item to bite off now. Integrations, B2B connectivity, those are huge in our business. So if we could reduce project risk by building that skill set and knowledge early, we wanted to find the way to do that. And it seems to be working really well from what I've gathered.
That's great. Great idea. And certainly something we've seen with a few other customers as well, exactly that approach. While maybe they're waiting for the S4 project to either kick off or certainly midway through it, that they want to try and get ahead of those projects and get off the critical path. Get these integrations done early if possible. So, again, I think another really good lesson potentially for anybody who's listening that haven't had to make that decision yet. And I suppose BTP obviously covers a range of things. Have you looked at data yet? Are you keeping an eye on where SAP's going with BDC and DataSphere and all the other tools?
So not yet, I wouldn't say. We've got DataSphere in the package that we purchased in our bill of material. We signed on the dotted line, I think, 30 days before the BDC announcement. So I haven't yet circled back with SAP to understand that. But at GROWMARK, we have a good amount of non-SAP data in our cloud. So we're actually trying to work within our own AWS tenant, just as a business decision, to do all of that data warehousing, data curation type work, because SAP isn't the majority of our cloud environment. So, we have to make that strategic decision in the future with BDC, DataSphere, Databricks of, are we going to move the majority of non-SAP data to that solution to do it there? Is it compelling enough to do it there? Or is it just easier and makes more sense to continue down the path with a native solution in AWS or something else to do that work? So we've got DataSphere in the package so that we can get the right way to access S4 data and enough visibility to learn what it's capable of. And then maybe we grow there, maybe we don't. We'll see once we get down that path.
Again, like a really common situation as well, where you guys are on that, and you're right. There's a lot of work being done to try and predict how this all fits together in the longer term. As you say, many customers have already started their own data platforms, and but they also want to integrate that to the SAP platform somehow. So, it's certainly, as you say, on the backlog for you guys, because of course, data always leads to AI, right? And no podcast is complete without banging on about AI for a while.
Sure.
But in terms of GROWMARK, I mean, where are you guys with the whole AI agenda? What successes or otherwise have you seen so far?
So that's a great question. I get that question all the time from leadership and others around the building. I'd say that GROWMARK is is dabbling and staying aware of everything that's happening. But there aren't too many cases where we're building or putting large investments into AI right now. We're starting with the low-hanging fruit. So we've piloted Microsoft Copilot around the company to understand what it can do. We're exploring a variety of the tools and capabilities in AWS to learn what they can do. And we're doing some pilots with some third parties to understand, from a data and analytics space, what's it capable of? Can it help us map the ontology of this database a little bit more easily? Just really starting to explore what's possible at this point, knowing that it's going to be very important for us to be able to react quickly in the right solution long term. One thing I actually kind of am excited about, and we've talked about this in the past, is I'm really interested in some of the generative AI capabilities when it comes to our S/4HANA migration. I was on the original implementation team. I've done the slog of documentation and test scripts and all of that just takes so much time, but it feels so repetitive. And I think that that's going to be a really big use case for us to make our project more successful, more efficient, and allow us to move more quickly. That could be an area where we take a first tangible step and it is worth it for us to do this, because this is a high visibility, high risk, very complex project that numerous people are going to spend a lot of time on. We may look at those types of solutions as we go forward, whether it's, again, that generated documentation, assistance with test scripts, maybe some AI-assisted automation as we go through this. That could be an area where we open the can a little bit more.
No, that's smart. I think I suppose it's true of all IT, right? But one of the things that we've seen is you've got to find a problem you need to solve first, and otherwise everything looks like it's an AI solution. And but as you point out, I mean, in the space of SAP projects, and you're absolutely right, the amount of not just manual work involved, but the amount of information that needs to be absorbed by SMEs is vast. And of course, that's one of the real strengths of Gen AI, is the ability to take unstructured data and turn it into a semantic that anybody can consume. So, we're certainly, as we've talked about, we see some of our technology helping specifically in that space of projects. And but we're seeing, I think that will very quickly, you'll see a range of capabilities pop up. And then, of course, there's what are SAP doing in the space, not just the project, but into business AI. And I think everybody's quite keen to see how that unfolds. There's no doubt SAP have made a lot of noise about it at the Sapphires and, even earlier in the year. But again, being on S4, as you say, isn't, security is great, but as these capabilities come out from SAP, you'll be front and center of being able to receive those and use them.
Yeah, and I think today more than ever, which is probably said too much, but it feels like today more than ever, you really want to make sure as a business, you're on a platform, any technology platform, whatever it may be, that has that level of investment and isn't at risk of being left behind. Because in the last 6 months, when something changes materially in the span of 6 to 8 weeks, it's nice to know, at least from our perspective, that SAP in this case is doing so much in the space to try to change the way their tool works in light of all the new AI adjacent innovations that are going to start coming out either now or in the very near future. So that was a huge part of our decision too. It's intangible, it's forward looking, but it's like we don't think we want to be on the other side of that line. We want to make sure we're ready to go and we've explored and know what's possible, but we're also using software that is capable as well as things change.
No, absolutely. And again, for anyone listening, that's a big kind of common theme I've heard a lot from customers, which is, there are guardrails here. SAP's been very clear about trying to get people to as you say, get on the right side of those. And I think GrowMark's made some very clever decisions in the timing of getting there. But Jordan, look, we're getting to the end of the time. So just in summary, if you don't mind, I mean, again, customers like yourself who've gone through this decision, this journey, some people are much further behind than you are. Any kind of overarching leave behinds, takeaways that you would like people to bear in mind as they're trying to navigate what for many people is new and complex and tricky to see the future with?
One of the things that sticks out to me is don't underestimate the amount of prep work that might go into looking at an S/4HANA migration. We started some exploration work with partners like Lemongrass and SAP and others almost 2 years ago, just to make sure we could understand scope and approach and landscape and everything. And even still, we're coming in right at the finish line of when we want to start this project, and it's starting to feel rushed. And I'm like, gosh, we've been doing this for 2 years. How am I rushed all of a sudden? So I think that's one of the bigger standouts is make sure you start early and give yourself enough time to find the partners that you want to work with and explore the scope of the project and understand how you want to go about it. That'll pay off in the long run because your project will shrink because that preparation phase really starts to drop as you go about it. That's one thing that kind of sticks out to me. And, the other thing is a lot of the times the move to S4 and RISE is a business decision. You want to make sure you've got the right return on investment. But at GrowMark, just so I think a lot of companies look for there's a huge return on this decision. It's the most financially smart thing to do. S4 kind of fell into that category. We had a good business case that the migration to S4 was worth it, but we didn't necessarily try to explore that with the RISE decision. So I would say don't be afraid to kind of park your decision to move to RISE with your S4 migration in ways that aren't as much of business case heavy. I think there's a lot of intangibles with that move that are considered. And in GrowMark's case specifically, we just said, this feels like the right thing for us to do. I'm not going to try to find a bunch of value and justify it because it's going to be in AWS in our case. We're familiar. There's a level of trust that exists, and it gets us those future innovations and unlocks that additional investment from SAP. So it feels wrong to not do it. And we'll have a partner along the way to help manage the transition and everything there is with Lemongrass as well. So that helped with the decision too.
No, that's great. Jordan, look, I really appreciate your time and your lessons learned. I mean, everybody loves hearing directly from people who are in the field at the cutting edge doing this stuff. So I appreciate taking the time. Thank you very much. And to all the listeners, thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to speaking to you next time. So Jordan, goodbye and thanks.
Thanks, Eamon.